Let me tell you a little bit about Matt Heinz. Matt was elected to be a Pima supervisor in District 2 back in 2020, and he voted in favor of requiring everyone in Pima County to wear face coverings indoors. So it's great to be in an area where that's in effect. And Matt has also supported vaccinations and COVID testing. Dr. Heinz has been an attending physician at the Tucson Medical Center since 2003. And there, he treats patients with a wide range of diagnoses, from heart attacks to head trauma to chronic conditions like diabetes and PTSD and cancer. And with that, Matt, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you all. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join you. My candidacy kind of at the last minute, prompted by the pandemic situation that we're facing still, 22, we would be in a safe place in terms of public health, and that we could be doing this in person, like I've done multiple times before with DGT. So it's regrettable, and unfortunately, we're still in kind of a pandemic mode right now in the hospitals throughout Pima County, throughout Arizona, and the nation. And what I think I found most surprising is that we, like humankind, made the decision to do that. Not all of us, obviously. I'm vaccinated and boosted, and I wear my mask when I'm, around other people in close proximity, of course, in the hospital, at work. But that as a society, 1/3 of us still refuse to get vaccinated, and that I could never, in my wildest nightmares, ever have imagined that so many people would be so willfully ignorant, or would just be willing to do this to everyone else. It's such a betrayal of the social contract that we used to hold, with one another. And that really, that's still affecting me as a physician, treating patients. I treat, what was not on the list that you just heard was lots of respiratory illnesses these days. 1/3 of the ICU in my hospital and in all of the other hospitals in Pima County are filled with, for the most part, unvaccinated but critically ill patients with COVID. And most of the efforts for the healthcare workers, for myself, for my other physician colleagues, for our amazing teams of respiratory therapists, and for the nurses, these amazing men and women who are right at the bedside with these folks all the time. We are crusaders against COVID, and I guess I always imagined that we would be helped and supported by the population, and to have 1/3 of the people work, so hard to thwart public health efforts, to make the incredibly selfish, wrong-headed decision to not get vaccinated, despite all the data we have, and knowing, at least at this point, knowing full well what that means for our hospitals and potentially neighbors. Unvaccinated people are absolutely directly leading to the deaths of thousands of Arizonans. And I cannot believe that this is political. Like getting your kid the measles, mumps, rubella vaccination, or polio, or the hepatitis B series for those going into healthcare and other situations. These are not controversial issues. Seatbelts, airbags, speed limits, though I will admit that I don't always adhere to them. But, come on. These are basic public health things that should never have been politicized. And the fact that I had to chastise Supervisor Christy for what he has done, what so many others in the Republican Party have done, in terms of popularizing and politicizing public health, life-saving public health mitigation efforts, whether it's at the local level, statewide, or nationally. That is, I don't know how Governor Ducey can sleep. He has personally led to the deaths of thousands of Arizonans because of the fact that he never put a mask mandate in place for the entire state, even back in March of 2020. And Dr. Christ, I'm so glad she's not there anymore. What a disgrace to medicine. Why in the world does it make any sense politically? Why does it make any sense politically to do things that endanger your supporters? And how hypocritical. Supervisor Christy is fully vaccinated. All of his staff is fully vaccinated. he wears at least one mask walking around the supervisor's floor on the 11th floor of our building. He follows the rules himself, but he encourages, just like so many other Republicans, encourages their supporters to disregard them. And that makes people unsafe, all of us. And it's just disgusting. And I cannot believe that this shouldn't be a political subject at all, right? And so, sorry to be Debbie Downer on everything, but like we should not have a pandemic anymore. This should have been done 6-7 months ago, or almost entirely done. And it's not, and it's because of humans. It's not, our behavior as humans is leading to this persistence, to Omicron. And God help us if we ever get a variant, maybe the next variant will have 50 instead of 32 mutations to the spike protein, and it will be able to spread maybe as effectively as Omicron. But what if it has a mortality of some of the other coronaviruses we've all heard about? SARS-1, that didn't go very far, thank God, but that mortality rate was, I believe, 25%, in that range. And one we don't hear about a lot, another incredibly scary the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, that's MERS. That coronavirus had a mortality of about 50%. The mortality, thankfully, for SARS-2 still is under 1%. That is a huge number when you have tens of millions of people getting infected, of course. But think about, like, those are like world-ending, like essentially like society-destroying numbers. If you have something that spreads like measles or Omicron variant and kills half of the people it infects, like, you won't have doctors or nurses because half of us will be dead, right? No one's going to be able to actually treat people. And the other point that I reflect on every time I'm admitting someone to the hospital with COVID, and we treat everyone, right? We don't give people grief about not being vaccinated. We just do what we can to fix them. But like, it's such a disservice. It's such disrespectful, I would say, to those who have gone before and sacrificed themselves. Like, there are physicians and their family members, and nurses and their family members, and all the different hospital staff and their family members who are dead because they sacrificed themselves. They ran toward the problem like we are taught to do, right? We still showed up in the hospitals, even when everybody was for the first couple months, we were all hiding under our mattresses, kind of. I get that. But not EMS, not firefighters, not the EMS crews, not the nurses and respiratory therapists and ICU staff. Everyone was showing up to their jobs just like they were supposed to. And some of us died. And they sacrificed their lives so that the rest of humanity could survive to the point where we have a vaccine and we have better therapeutics. And that's, what does it say about, how disrespectful is that for us? And I mean broadly us, not me, and probably not anybody in this meeting. But that is not how we should be honoring the sacrifice of our fallen healthcare workers. Like, everybody should be vaccinated. In 1952, when the polio vaccine came out, as you may know, the first outbreak of polio in the United States was 1894. And it took 58, am I mathing that right? 6, yeah. So 1952, 58 years, almost 6 decades until the Salk vaccine came out for polio. It wasn't nearly as good as our mRNA vaccines against coronavirus, which we were able to develop in about 9 months, thanks to the work of our global scientist community. But, it's been turned into a conspiracy theory, and the government's going to track us with it, and all this nonsense that would have been put to bed pretty quickly if you had Republicans and joining with Democrats on the side of the human population and humankind instead of on the side of COVID, which is just something in healthcare. It is so incredibly frustrating to be put in a position where we're like that. It's really hard to articulate. It's very confusing. It's still very confusing for me. What happens when you don't get vaccinated. Actually, the latest data from the Arizona Department of Health Services is striking. You are 31, actually it's 31 point something. You are 31 times more likely to die from COVID if you're not vaccinated compared to someone who is. 31, not 31% more likely. No, 31-fold, 31 times more likely to die from COVID if you aren't vaccinated. That's the only number that, that's stunning, right? So you would figure that people would be interested in getting vaccinated. So this is taking up a lot of of course, almost all of my time in the hospital, and a lot of time on the board of supervisors as we work to make the community safe and to do what we can to make sure that vulnerable populations are protected, whether that's from county employees by requiring vaccination of our county employees. For the most part, most of them now, actually the vast majority of county employees are thankfully vaccinated, or we're requiring masks indoors in our buildings. I look forward to a time when we don't have to be talking about an ongoing public health calamity. That would be fantastic. And the key to that is convincing Supervisor Christy to stop telling people to ignore mandates and to encouraging them not to get vaccinated if they don't want to. That is a terrible message. And that message kills people. And just to be incredibly morbid, I suppose I have to, 36,000 more people than we expected died in 2021. That study is striking. It's the excess mortality study that was done by the Arizona Public Health Association, and you can get that on their website. It is terrible to review. 36,000 more Arizonans are not here, thanks to Doug Ducey. And I know that's not very nice to say, but it's true. He is the reason. He and Dr. Christ and people like Supervisor Christy, they are the reason that so many people continue to be resistant to vaccination and other public health mitigation efforts. And this blame should fall squarely upon their shoulders. And make no mistake, I'm not going to ever stop saying that because it's true. Now, 24,000 of that 36,000, 24,000 were respiratory related, COVID related deaths. But the other 12,000, I was speaking with Will Humble, who is the head of the organization and former effective head of our public health agency here. He points out that 12,000 of that 36,000 looks like it's due to a disproportionately high number of cardiac related deaths. Let me tell you what that means. That means that while 1/3 of our ICU beds, are being occupied by COVID patients who are critically ill, that means in many cases that elective procedures such as a valve replacement surgery, another open heart surgery like coronary artery bypass graft, so bypass surgeries, those are 95+% elective, which people are like, what, elective? No, they are scheduled usually weeks in advance. And the surgical team does everything and it's a scheduled process. It's typically not an emergency at 2 a.m. Sometimes it is, very rarely. And so those elective procedures, if there isn't an available critical care bed, an ICU bed as a landing pad, you can't just we can't bust open your chest and replace a bunch of arteries and bypass, and you can't just that's not like an outpatient procedure. You need to be in an ICU for a couple of days after that, obviously. And because of the COVID situation here, and because of this ongoing willful ignorance or whatever we want to use to describe it, that is actually killing people too, indirectly, because they get their surgeries postponed again and again and again. And sometimes they have the big one. They have the big heart attack and they don't make it. Or they have a big heart attack and almost don't make it, but now they can't go upstairs for the rest of their life because so much of their heart muscle was damaged before we could get that bypass done. That is equally unconscionable, right? And that excess mortality report shows us exactly what I think a lot of people in healthcare were trumpeting 2 years ago, the Dr. Fauci's of the world. So, and that is that we were really very scared that COVID would take a lot of lives, but that hospitals being overwhelmed would impair our ability to respond to the needs of the community. And that's basic stuff like bypass surgeries and other ones that require ICU beds especially. So a lot of people in Arizona lost their lives because of the governor and because of Republican politicians using a public health issue as some kind of just disgusting rallying cry. And leadership is not following a misguided, social media driven, conspiracy theory driven nonsense. Leadership is standing up and saying no. And I have to give, don't like disconnect yet, but I do have to give some credit to the former president, because even though he gets booed when he does it, he actually will say that President Trump will say that, look, Melania and I got vaccinated and we've gotten boosted. You should get boosted too. And sometimes and they boo him, like, but thank you and good for you, and thank you for developing the vaccine. Not helpful that you kind of then trashed it afterwards, but like that. I believe it's really important to put credit where it is due. Most everything else I disagree with regard to the last president, but so that's a lot of what's been occupying my work on the board and my work in the hospital. And I just hope we can get through this fast. Okay. So if try to be patient with your skeptical friends, family, loved ones. Don't block them. Just try to convince them that it's really important for everyone, for the economy, for our recovery. Look, Pima County is not recovering as fast as Maricopa. Heck, Tucson's not recovering as fast as Flagstaff. That's not all right. And we need to work on that as well. I plan to, do what we can. One of the things that we can do, of course, is just get out there and it's difficult to compete with 4.5 million folks. I mean, Phoenix and Maricopans do kind of like suck all the oxygen out of the room when it comes to relocating to places like Arizona. But we have a lot to offer in Southern Arizona, and another role that we have as supervisors is to make sure that the companies, wherever they are in the world or in this country, in other places, understand that we are a wonderful community, a much safer place from the pandemic standpoint and public health standpoint, just because of how much space we have here, open space. We're a safer place to relocate and have people live and work. So I think that's important to point out. We have to do what we can to get that message out to the world and to the rest of the nation, so we can encourage some of these businesses that are relocating to come to us and not just to the Maricopans.
Thank you very much, Matt. I share your outrage and astonishment at the people who are just clogging up ICU beds because they were too nuts to go out and get vaccinated. And we have some people who have their hands raised right now. Dr. Barbara Warren, please go ahead.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for this. Thank you for your work in this incredible presentation. Very credible presentation. I have several questions about boosters. First of all, if you're not boosted but you've been vaccinated, what are the chances of your getting? I'll just give you all my questions and you can answer them how you want. What are the chances of your getting COVID and how severe it would be? Second of all, if you are boosted, what are the chances of your getting COVID at all? And if you are boosted, what is the next time? What is the next period of time? How long do we wait for the second booster?
So yeah, boosters, and I thank you for bringing this up. I should have absolutely mentioned this before. We as the county have done very well with boosters, but we can do a lot better. Our vaccination numbers overall, and I mean like 2 doses of the mRNA, 1 or Johnson & Johnson, that gets us to 66%. Maricopa County is, I believe, 55 right now, 54, 55%. So we are 10% more vaccinated than Maricopa County. And actually, as one of my staff members personally found out when up in Maricopa County, nobody wears masks anywhere for any reason ever. Nobody, right? So like, and Pima County, I know not as many people are maybe wearing them now, but I do believe that we are doing a lot better here in Southern Arizona and in Tucson. But so boosters are really interesting. It is, it's again a credit to the science, this technology, the fact that this mRNA vaccine is able to withstand, human stupidity, the fact that we still haven't all gotten vaccinated, and withstand that to the point where it can still work quite well, especially when you have full vaccination plus a booster shot. Then folks are much less likely that have that that are boosted to contract Omicron, even though there are 32 spike protein mutations, meaning that's nowhere near as it doesn't look to your immune system like this Omicron variant looks very, very different than the native virus or than Alpha or Delta or the other variants, right? So we need to do better with our booster program. And I think that's something that, the numbers are, we have 40% of fully vaccinated people. So like that means it's 66% of everybody in Pima County. So 40% of the 66%, right? Sorry to like make all your heads explode with all the numbers, but of these fully vaccinated folks have been boosted. That's not okay, right? We really need to work on that because it doesn't prevent transmission. You can still convey for a few days. You can even like in an asymptomatic situation, you can still convey it. But it is very important to focus on boosters. And I've asked Dr. Cullen and Dr. Garcia and our county staff to work on some additional ideas, messaging programs to make sure that folks, the vaccine, because I think a lot of people, okay, you're fully vaccinated, you're good. This isn't like some of the childhood vaccines we get, just once or twice, and then you're good for life. This is very likely going to be something like more like the flu shot. We're going to probably have to get some kind of booster every year or maybe two, for a while, especially as this pandemic persists and becomes more like an endemic. But I don't have those exact numbers in terms of, the exact risk like with me. I can certainly get them for you, but suffice to say that being boosted provides for significant protection even against Omicron, and that's a really good reason to get it. And being fully vaccinated still confers significant. You're very, very unlikely to die or even be hospitalized if you're fully vaccinated, but it's even more protection if you're boosted. And that is what the studies are showing us so far with regard to the booster and Omicron.
How long do we wait for the second booster?
That is a very good question. And that has a lot to do with, like some of that is on the manufacturing side of things, Moderna, Pfizer, where are they at in developing this? And of course, the booster is basically the booster we've been getting right now is just like a third dose, or I think in the case of Moderna, a half dose of the same thing we've already gotten. I think more than just a second booster of the same thing, we need to look at a new, like a revised sort of booster that is like, a booster plus that is actually specifically tailored to the Omicron variant with those 32 mutations, and like so that actually has some specific immunity tailored exactly for the variants Alpha, Delta, Omicron, especially the ones that we know can either spread a lot better or unfortunately kill more people or hospitalize more people. We want a shot to be developed that actually confers a little bit more specific immunity, and that is something I suspect I know that they're working on right now. As to when that comes out, I don't know exactly when that is, but I'm sure we'll hear more from the CDC as that gets approved.
Thank you for all your work. It's incredible. It's wonderful.
Craig Markin has his hand up. Go ahead, Craig.
I have listened to the news and they talk about variants and mutations and now subvariants. What makes a variant and is mutation a mutation?
All viruses and bacteria as well, to a certain extent, as they go through their life cycle using us as the host to replicate. Anytime, and this can happen in humans as well. It's just our generation's time is 20, 25 years, and for a virus, it's days, hours to days. Any time on a genetic level that something is replicating, there can just be an oops. You can just have the wrong pair, like the wrong base pair was substituted. Just the molecular machinery of our cells screwed up. Nothing is 100%, right? And those things happen. Sorry,
that would be a mutation.
That's a mutation, exactly. So that mutation, the more something is replicating, and the shorter a life cycle, and the faster something replicates, the more chances you have of getting a mutation, right? So that's why you hear people saying, we really need to help vaccinate everywhere because, and I don't, not just Pima County, like there are parts of Pima County, especially in my district, District 2, on the south side in certain areas where we don't have that 66% number. And we need to work on that because if any part of a community, a state, nation, world has a pocket where people aren't vaccinated very much at all, that is a breeding ground basically for more of those mutations to happen that can result in a variant. Now, there are hundreds and hundreds of variants, even for at least dozens and dozens that they've discovered of COVID, of coronavirus, of SARS-2, but only a very small number of them kind of like pop up in the news, like with Omicron, the UK variant, Delta variant, all those ones, because they did something different. Because the mutations most often don't lead to increasing virulence, meaning killing more people or hospitalizing more people, and most often don't lead to higher transmissibility. But in some cases, like with the variants that we've all heard about, you get they can harm us more effectively, or in the case of Omicron, maybe they aren't quite as serious on a case-by-case basis, but that sucker can spread like measles almost. It's one of the most contagious viruses we've ever seen, right? So when you have 32 mutations of that spike protein gene, which is how our body kind of like can see, it's like on the outside of the virus, and it's how our immune system can see and target the virus. When you have the conformation or the shape of that protein changing up so much, it makes it harder for our immune system that is primed against the native one to really detect and neutralize it. So it's the accumulation of multiple mutations that happen at that cellular level that can cause, on occasion, some of these really significant variants to pop up. And the way we prevent that is getting everybody everywhere fully vaccinated and boosted and keeping up with that regimen as long as we have to prevent these variants from popping up and harming us.
Mike Bryan has his hand up. Tell us about the questions that came in the chat, Mike.
Yeah, we got quite a number. First of all, do you have any thoughts about a development of a universal coronavirus vaccine? I know they're working on that. Do you have any update for us on that?
So there are a lot of coronaviruses, actually. In fact, before COVID, there are lots. They cause common cold. They cause bronchitis. So like leaving aside the SARS-1 and then the MERS, those potential global almost pandemic ones, and SARS-2. So because of what we were just kind of talking about, and I love how we're all becoming like virologists and immunologists and stuff, because like we need to know what's going on and why. And I really appreciate everybody's interest in this. So like it's kind of hard to get sort of like just like with the flu, it can mutate, and it can, it does this sort of annual sort of cycle. We kind of see what happens with influenza. We kind of see what happens in other parts of the world, like Australia. And then we base how we design every year. We base how we design our flu shots on the experiences of those who we kind of make an educated guess, right? The public health professionals and vaccine producers, they try to make an educated guess to see, okay, what's most likely to be the dominant form or variant of the flu virus when it comes around every winter. And so similarly, I don't know that we're going to be able, just because of the mutation situation we just talked about, we may not be able to get like a one and done kind of, we don't need any more coronavirus. I'm hopeful that we can get to a place where maybe we can get ones that are good enough that'll hold off, and so many people have it that it can't replicate as much, meaning it can't make as many new variants. So maybe we can get to a place where it's a shot we get every few years, like more like a tetanus shot. If you step on a piece of metal or something in the yard and you have to go get sewed up and get the wound cleaned out in urgent care of the ER, they're going to ask you, hey, have you had a tetanus shot in the past 5 years or past 10? Do you remember when it was? And if you're not really sure, we're just going to give you another one, because if it's less than 10 years and sometimes less, we want to make sure that you're protected. So I'm hopeful we can get to that point, but I don't see us getting with coronavirus to a place where we can just do one shot and be done.
A couple more coronavirus questions came in through chat. One is that do masks really help? How much? And is a double mask situation equivalent to or better than an N95?
Masks absolutely help with regard to respiratory viruses that are transmitted by way of respiratory droplets. Every time you exhale, you are projecting microscopic, itty bitty little bits of water. And those little bits of water contain, if you happen to have a respiratory illness, they contain, dozens, hundreds of viral particles. So that is very, very helpful. If you have a mask on, I usually have some near me, almost always. I don't have one right now, but if you have a mask on, that doesn't block 100%. It's not like we're putting you in like a hermetically sealed, not like in a scuba suit or in like a biohazard level 4 containment suit, but you are substantially decreasing by 90 to 95%. You're catching the vast majority of those respiratory droplets. And that is incredibly helpful. So especially, and the studies bear this out, like if you have nobody masked, it's a free for all. If you have one person masked, that's helpful because 95% of the respiratory droplets are blocked from this person to this other person. And if both people are masked, then you have some degree of protection on the potential receiver of that virus. And it's almost impossible for whether it's COVID or any other influenza. And we can see that for those who are masking, I have not gotten COVID, and I probably just jinxed myself. But like I have not. I don't know how. I've been armpits deep in COVID stew, in the hospitals since March 2020, and I got tested every Tuesday for a year, mid 2020 all the way through I think May or so of 2021. I don't get tested as regularly anymore, but I haven't had influenza. I haven't had a common, like any kind of a cold sort of situation. I have really bad allergies for sure every now and then, but seasonally though, I don't know. I think the masks have proved, we were kind of making fun of a lot of the Asian nations where they were wearing masks all the time after they dealt with SARS-1. Yeah. And you know what? They had the right idea. So I'm probably never going to not wear a mask in an airplane.
Another question is, do you have an opinion about how the local school boards here in Pima County are doing on their COVID policies?
That is a really good point. And I forgot the N95 portion of it. 2 surgical masks are not equivalent to an N95. But in hospitals, we have an N95 and then over which we put a surgical mask so that I don't have to they're expensive and there are not as many of them. I don't want to have to keep changing an N95. So the outside mask you can then throw away and then get another one on so the next patient is protected. So, but yeah, that's not quite the same. But any surgical mask or N95 is sufficient. I don't think you necessarily need to layer the masks. Cloth, just like tying a piece of like a shirt or a bandana, like that kind of thing is not really optimal. So if possible, surgical mask or an N95 type mask is what we recommend. So, and then could you repeat that other question, please?
Yeah, the Pima County school boards, the local school boards, how are they doing on their COVID policies?
Yeah, TUSD, great. Frankly, most of them great. They're concerned. They're very concerned as they should be. We really do need to keep kids in school. In-person learning is so important for development, socialization, all this stuff. And also, like as we've seen, thankfully, a lot of folks can do their jobs, maybe 40-ish%, maybe more, can do their jobs without physically going somewhere, in certain professions. But still, teaching is hard, and I think a lot of people have a much greater appreciation of our teachers, and I hope that will be reflected in policies going forward to compensate them more properly. In my opinion, that would be great. But there's some variability, Vail, the public schools there, Saurita, which is very much in my district. They have been very reticent to enable any sort of mask requirements. And that is, I think, if you set a good example and we all just act like adults, guess what? The 5-year-olds will emulate us. Okay. Yeah, they're going to play with them and maybe pull them off every now and then, or you're going to have to reinforce it. It's annoying, but kids by and large are looking to adults to be adults. And when we act like adults and behave properly and say, look, I don't like wearing a mask. I don't like wearing a mask everywhere in the hospital. I don't. I know why we have to, and I do it, of course, anyway. And explaining things to our children, they're going to get it. But this stupid fight that we keep picking with ourselves on masking and other things like this is, I mean, it's just like we're 4-year-olds in the sandbox. It's really dumb, except the consequences are people in our community have died as a result of our little, sandbox fight. I wish they were all, but look, TUSD is the largest or second largest school district in the state. So TUSD has set some really good examples. I really appreciate that, what they've done. We've seen though in all of our school districts that there's not enough testing, I think, and there's been some issues with accessibility for the testing because we're only able to respond appropriately or when we have the data, when we have the information, when we know who has the virus or who is exposed to someone who may have had, like we need that information as fast as possible. And so if there's any sort of bottleneck, like with regard to testing, then that constrains our ability to, like, in real time know what needs to be done. So just like the Board of Supervisors, the school boards need that information, as well as of course our health department needs that information for contact tracing, all that kind of stuff. So I think they're doing overall quite well, and with a couple of exceptions in with regard to the districts that have political resistance to doing any sort of masking or responsible mitigation. And the numbers have borne out that those decisions have been quite wrong, because you see additional classrooms being closed. In some cases, I think they came closer, maybe even once had to close a school in these districts. That happens because of a lack of enforcement of the mask policy, or just a lack of a mask policy at all, not reinforcing the hand washing and the seating situation, the distancing. That doesn't make any sense. And as I said, it's really important that the adults actually act like we're adults, so we can provide that example for our kids.
I want to move on to Sandy Saltz. Go right ahead.
Saturday's article, the big article on TMC in Saturday's paper, your colleague Jenny Tuttle referred to 30 cardiac surgeries canceled in January. Why? What prevents hospital management, hospital board of directors from saying unwillingly non-vaccinated with COVID, bye-bye, don't get in?
You have no idea how many times we've talked about that exact thing among healthcare workers in the hospital. And it feels so wrong to deny somebody their previously scheduled life-saving and necessary surgery because someone decided to not protect themselves after now more than a year of fairly widely available vaccination, and to give them the bed instead. But in healthcare and in medicine, it's a triage-based system. So whether you have the best insurance in the world or no insurance at all, if you come in and you're kind of blue and wheezing and not breathing, and you've been there for 30 seconds, you're coming right back to see us. But if you've been, struggling with abdominal pain for 9 hours sitting in our lobby, you're going to sit for another hour or two, because that, it's what's going to kill you fastest. We respond to that. And there are some federal laws that require us to treat every patient who walks over the threshold. And sometimes that can be a frustration, but I hear what you're saying, and I don't think changing that. I think having insurance look at maybe treating it like smoking. No one can say that tobacco use, oh my gosh, I got lung cancer. Well, no, of course you did. I mean, I'm sorry you got lung cancer, but yeah, there was an additional risk factor there that means you smoked for 45 years. But at this point, it's hard to blame, it's not the tobacco companies. It's like people being willfully ignorant and not getting vaccinated. So if you choose not to get vaccinated, I totally support having your insurance company should be able to adjust the premiums, right? So there are other things we can do in terms of just saying, nope, you don't get an ICU bed. You can drown your own secretions in the ambulance bay. Good luck. There are some times when I would really like to say that because I know that putting that person or those people on my shift in those ICU beds is going to screw over and possibly take the life of another person waiting for a cardiac procedure, like an open heart procedure. You have no idea how so we're all very conflicted about this. And I just wish people would wake up. and just get vaccinated. But I hear you. I agree. I in some ways agree with you there.
Thank you.
Okay, let's turn to Molly McCassin. She's got her hand up. Go right ahead, Molly.
Oh, thanks so much, Larry. And thank you so much, Matt, for all your work on this issue and other issues. You've been fighting for us. I want to thank you for your support for universal background checks at the fairgrounds gun shows. That effort, of course, has not been supported by a majority of the supervisors on the board because of the state threatening to withhold money. Yet the gun violence epidemic goes on. The epidemic of buying guns, and a third and half of them are unregistered guns, legal but unregistered, that continues. What can we do in Pima County to curb this rising sale of guns and rising violence?
We have a lot of allies, and actually we aren't always on the same page, but I think that Supervisor Scott actually has been really pretty good on this issue. Of course, Supervisor Grijalva as well. We are all very concerned about it from the public health side and from like the human tragedy side of things. And this is terrible. It is, I mean, we've talked to the county attorney multiple times now, and unfortunately, the county attorney continues to say that based on the just numerous, like there are layers and layers of constitutional and statutory protections for, I kind of want to, I guess, gun sales, gun lobby, the gun manufacturers throughout, peppered all over our statutes and constitution, making it impossible for a political subdivision of the state, which means the county, a town, or in any incorporated town, city, or the counties, the 15 counties, from going rogue and doing things more independently. We were able to do some of that until the governor to basically like pound sand, dude. Like Dr. Cullen is our public health authority for Pima County, and what she says and what Dr. Garcia says and what our board says is what we're going to do. And the court supported that on public health, where the statute actually does specifically confer authority to our Dr. Cullen, right? Where it's the opposite problem on the gun violence pandemic, really. And that continues to be our frustration, as much as the board, I think, would be willing to go forward there. I think we should go forward and challenge it legally, but I mean, we would end up burning through a lot of county taxpayer dollars, and I think ultimately we would probably not prevail.
Just a quickie thing, isn't gun violence, though, a public health
absolutely
concern? So
that's right.
There a chance that we could win in court?
On that basis, I think on that basis, that is one of the bases that I would say would, and I think probably Supervisor Grijalva might agree with that. I think probably most of the board would, maybe not Supervisor Christy, but I don't know if Supervisors Bronson and Scott would. Well, I mean, they voted to sue the city of Tucson, so like on the water issue, so which seems like just a really weird two Democratic local administrations, like, duking it out in court and burning taxpayer dollars seems kind of silly to me. But so it doesn't seem very likely that they would be willing to support that. But I do think it's reasonable to use that frame. The public health framing is, you're absolutely right. It is a public, and remember what we were talking about. We need to know like who has COVID to figure out how to respond to it. Well, we need to know how is this violence occurring? What do we need to do this root cause analysis? We need the data. And under George W. Bush, right, they banned any funding at the CDC, and the CDC was told you can't look into. And that's different now. That's actually believe that they can do that now. But there's the whole decade and a half where they couldn't even look at the public health impact of gun violence. And now getting some data there is going to, I think, maybe bolster our ability to show a court potentially that, look, this is truly an issue that is public health related, and our authority might be something we can use to do something about it.
Okay, we have a question from Regina Murphy-Darling. Go ahead, Regina.
Okay, Matt, high five, high praise. Thank you for all you're doing to protect us. My question is, how can we support you on your efforts to promote or move the county forward in terms of their climate action plan. So I'm thinking, what COVID doesn't kill, climate change will. I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I think it's an equally important conversation to keep alive. So what can we do as your constituents to help you bring that front and center?
We actually talked about that there's like sustainability action, but like we have at the county level in place some impressive goals, and that have been put into place. Was it 2 decades ago, decade and a half ago? We are just failing to meet a lot of those goals with regard to how much we're loading into the landfill. That's going way up. It's we're supposed to be targeting, lower, like 50% lower by XYZ date. And we're going in the wrong direction there. We have, I think, policy, and it is a policy of the board to be addressing these, especially as regards the 7,000 employees in all of our buildings in the county itself. We just in, I think it was it was 1 or 2 meetings ago, we talked about this very issue, and we are already looking at somehow finding a way to empower, maybe to place the authority and oversight of, to make sure all our departments and divisions of the county are doing what we need to do in terms of, being good stewards. Because if it's not happening in our local jurisdiction, if the city of Tucson isn't doing this, if Pima County and all of our subsections aren't doing this and really setting this example, and then it's really hard we need to lead by example in part. In terms of additional policy, I'm certainly open to working with you and others, but advocating for this is incredibly important, because the planet's going to be fine whether or not humankind can survive here, whether or not we have water, clean water and air to drink and breathe, or that our grandchildren do. That's going to be the trick, right?
Okay, go ahead. Mike, why don't you close it out? I know that you have a couple of questions from the chat.
I do. I have one of my own as well, which is, can we get an update on where we are on living wage in Pima County, please?
I would very much like to see Pima County just say, hey, it's got to be $15 an hour, and do basically from the board what the city of Tucson voters just recently did. On that same timeline is fine. I frankly think it should be accelerated. It shouldn't be 4 years or 3 years. It should be, next Tuesday. But I understand there's some logistical issues there. At this time, it doesn't seem like the board, and this would be really helpful if, especially if y'all, reaching out and letting the supervisors know that this is a really important issue. It's something that we the board have been empowered by the Arizona voters, I think 60-40, when I'm going to mess this up. I think it was Prop 202 in 2006, but one of those propositions, minimum wage propositions, specifically empowered the local jurisdictions with the authority to establish and regulate minimum wage, as long as it's not lower than the state wide minimum wage. So the county board of supervisors, you just need 3 of us to vote to increase the minimum wage, and it would be in effect 30 days later. Right now, it doesn't look like Supervisor Scott or Supervisor Bronson are interested in having the board itself extend the minimum wage that City of Tucson just did to the county line, but we are working to bring together a group of stakeholders from the business community and from labor and from, frankly, all sorts of stakeholders together to really explain why this is so important. And if you really want to, this is so incredibly important to so many people. And this should also not really be a partisan issue, right? There are tons and tons of folks that may have, vote in a more conservative way than I would, that are stuck in these types of jobs that do not pay living wages, and we need to fix that for everybody.
And it's good for business. Any update on the RTA reauthorization?
That continues to be a bit of a sticky wicket. We want to have the city of Tucson remain part of that, obviously, for very obvious political reasons. I don't know that I'm not going to say that. That's way too diplomatic. There's just no way that an RTA without the city of Tucson voters politically at the ballot box is going to go anywhere. It's not, I mean, Sahuarita, Oro Valley, and unincorporated Pima County, that's not where the votes are for this regional transportation program. And the funny thing is, the existing RTA has been so road heavy. Like, I mean, driving around in downtown is like, and on Broadway, which continues to be like quite the frustration. Because how do you think I get from downtown, like South downtown where I live, to Tucson Medical Center where I work? Okay, it's like 22nd or Broadway, and like, good luck, go with God on some of that because of the construction. So but there's so many of these major tributaries that are like beautiful, that are all over the place and throughout the county. And they help people from out of the city of Tucson, from outside the city of Tucson, come in and do stuff downtown and cause more wear and tear to those roads there. But then, so I think a lot of the point that Mayor Romero makes, that we need a greater voice and a greater number of votes and influence for the county, but especially for the city of Tucson, that absolutely it's democratic, it's appropriate to do, it makes sense, and we should do that, and I've advocated for it. So and actually Supervisor Scott recently proposed that we have a weighted sort of voting system for PAG RT as well, for PAG actually as well, which I appreciate that he was willing to do that, because it does make a lot of sense. So just stay tuned and stay involved and watch these meetings. I know that it can be kind of boring, but it's really, really important. The leadership of the RTA is very, what's a good word? Well, there are some problems there. I think with transparency, the leadership tends to be very controlling and interested in doing things their own way, and not so interested in being team players and kind of letting all the stakeholders participate. So just pay attention, and we'll keep shining a light on things.
Okay, let's close out our program today with Lillian Fox, who is ready to ask a question now. Go ahead, Lillian.
I wanted to know, where do you get your N95 mask?
There are options that would be effective in the hardware sections. There may be going to be, they might say they're like for, particulate or like it's going to be focused on, like preventing people from inhaling little teeny tiny bits of sawdust or like, I guess plasterboard or whatever, but those can be effective as well. And I get my masks just because I work at a hospital. So I get my masks at work. They're provided to us. And the same thing with the nurses and other doctors and respiratory therapists. We get our supply of PPE from the hospitals where we work. So that's I'm a kind of a bad example, because I'm not advocating for people to walk into the hospital and just kind of like grab or demand an N95. That's not a great place to do it. But the hardware store example is good.
I was also going to say, if people go to 3M's website, they will tell you that their mask will weed out the viruses. The N95s have to. They will also give you a comparison of all the other masks and how effective or not effective they are. They explain how to put it on, so it gives you the protection you need.
That's great. All very helpful. Thank you for pointing that out. And again, not a bad question at all.
The federal government is giving out free N95 masks. And I went to Fry's last Wednesday on Speedway in Pantano. And as you walked into the door, there's a great big box of individually packaged N95 masks from the federal government, and a sign that says about, take 3. I also bought N95 masks at Home Depot. Watch to be sure that they do not have the little respirator hole on them. That does not protect you.
That's correct.
You want to be sure that they're closed, because I opened and made sure. But there's supposedly you can also get the free ones at Walgreens, Walmart, and CVS, but not all stores have them. But I did. There was a huge box, and people didn't seem to realize what they were.
Also, the home COVID test as well. Like, that's something the federal government is doing.
The home COVID test, you have to go online, and they will do 4 free tests per household.
Mhm.
And all you have to do is go to covidtest.gov and fill in the information, and they mail them. Took me less than a week to get them.
Perfect.
Okay, folks, we've gone overtime, but Matt, you can see the intensity of interest on this topic. I want to thank everybody for coming to this meeting of Democrats of Greater Tucson, where you get to hear important officials and great presenters like Matt Heinz. And Matt, thank you so much for taking a part of your day, explaining reality to all of us here at Democrats of Greater Tucson.
My pleasure. Everyone
you,
stay
Matt.
safe.
And with that, I'll have to close the meeting. So we will see you in 1 week at noon on Monday. Thank you for coming.